Hello everybody, so today I thought it would be appropriate to start off this video with the infamous Oda quote, where he basically admits that he doesn't think the audience would be satisfied if Luffy defeats Kaido because his punch is so strong. This is obviously a quote that has been thrown around a lot in the community recently, and I think it's important, and so we'll be discussing that in this video a little bit later. And so, just like Jinbei used fire to free Nami and Luffy from Monteur's book back in Whole Cake Island, somebody, a stranger, a mysterious stranger, also uses fire to free Niji and Yonji in the cover page. If I'd had to guess who it was, I'd probably say it was either Pudding, Reiju, or Ichiji. So we have another mystery to solve, and the real point here is that this is just another way of Oda continuing to tease who the intruders are. He still hasn't revealed that for us yet. So a good question here would be, are the intruders the same people that set the book on fire? Because I don't think they are. I think those are two different parties. On that note, the anime was really good last night, especially the second half. Like, the first half of the episode was really good too, but the second half really took it to another level. Because during the first half of the episode, I did notice that it took the supernova forever to reach Kaido. They would charge forward and cover these tremendous distances, and they still wouldn't reach him. So I'm like, where is this distance even coming from? Like, they can't be that far from him. And even though I know that Kaido told Big Mom to sort of step back, to let him test the guys a little bit, there were moments where it just felt like she was completely absent, like she had completely disappeared, and it was just Kaido versus 5 dudes. I like the anime's incorporation to a bit of a God's Valley flashback with Garp and Roger. I thought that was very fitting, given this week's chapter. Second half of the episode, Law's Gammon Knife was handled very well, as was Killer's Scyther Sonic. We actually get an internal view of both attacks as they cause Kaido damage, which I thought was an added bonus. And then when Zoro cuts Bottle Breath, they actually show him going into the fire, which, you know, come on. But Zoro's not done yet, so we get the Flying Dragon Blaze, which looked amazing. I like the way they handled the intimidation factor with that attack. And then the episode ends on another high note, which I believe is the same way that the manga chapter that it's based on ended, which is with Luffy's Gatling. And that looked beautifully animated as well. Anyhow, the actual chapter starts off with a visual copy of the Luffy versus Doflamingo finale, only instead of Dofi, it's Kaido. But then the moment also reminded me of the Zoro versus King finale as well. Because as King is getting closer to getting defeated, and actually when he gets defeated, he gets these flashbacks to when he met Kaido, his relationship with him, and this discussion about Joy Boy. So we get a shot of 10-year-old little Kaido there destroying a city. I'm pretty interested in this city because the architecture looks like it uses a lot of columns. So he was a soldier from very early on, and something about his appearance reminds me of, like, the flashback that we got with Katakuri. So we get transported to this place called Vodka Kingdom in the past, which is very fitting considering the fact that we know Kaido grows up to become an alcoholic. It also reminds me of King Beer VI, which is a king that we meet in Reverie, and who is in charge of the Rashwan Kingdom. So now I'm wondering if there's a connection between this kingdom and Vodka Kingdom. Now, we still don't know if Kaido was actually born in Vodka Kingdom. I'm guessing he wasn't, because he's an Oni. But regardless, this part of the flashback reintroduces the reality of kingdoms having to pay tribute to the world government in order to maintain their status. So we kind of see how the world government is indirectly responsible for sort of encouraging war so that this kingdom can pay its tribute. And then we get to see how Kaido gets sold out to the Marines, courtesy of the king of Vodka Kingdom, because he wanted a seat at the Reverie. And so this relates to Albert/King's flashback with Kaido, where Kaido finds him in Punk Hazard, and he actually tells King, like, you know, if you stick with me, I promise I'll never sell you out. Because he knows what it feels like. And so just like we got a shot of Big Mom's first bounty poster, we also get a shot of Kaido's first bounty poster, which I believe says that he's worth 70 million berries. So even back then, it seems like Kaido's first bounty was higher than Big Mom's first bounty as well. So Kaido having a higher bounty than Big Mom has been a pattern that has continued till this day. Now, we already knew from Sengoku that the Rocks Pirates were formed in Full of Lead Island, or in Pirate Island, also known as Hashinosu Island, which is currently headquarters to Blackbeard. And so we see a little bit of that in this flashback. Apparently Whitebeard had already joined Rocks, because he's the one who scouts Kaido. And then of course we find out later that Whitebeard actually had a problem with the Rocks Pirates because it was a group made out of people with very big egos that couldn't work together as a team, which kind of is pointed at in this chapter as the reason, or one of the possible reasons, for why the Battle of God's Valley was lost. I like how the Whitebeard in the flashback kind of has like the same style as the Whitebeard that Oda drew in an SBS section. Now what's interesting is that the silhouette of the person who tells Kaido that they're going to God's Valley in the first place appears to be wearing a cape and a straw hat. And so to me, there's only one logical explanation for this, and that is that that man is actually a time-traveling Luffy who actually caused the God's Valley incident to take place in the first place. So because the power of the Nika Nika no Mi is so broken that nobody can explain the rules of it anymore, Luffy actually used the power of his Devil Fruit to travel back in time to tell Kaido to go to God's Valley so that Kaido could get defeated there, have his heart broken, get discouraged, make his way to Wano, and rule over the country to await Joy Boy's return so that Luffy could actually put his strength to the test against the very monster he created in the first place. Now, I've read some comments of people saying that they think that the silhouette actually belongs to Big Mom. But I don't know. To me, it looks like the figure is very obviously still wearing a straw hat. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's either a time-traveling Luffy or a time-traveling Roger. Or a time-traveling Shanks. I mean, Kaido did say that Haki is more powerful than Devil Fruits, so maybe Shanks' Haki can allow him to move through time so that he can cause things to happen in the past.
We're talking about time travel here. Either it's all a joke or none of it is.
So the Rock's pirates end up falling, and I like the consistency of how the news only says that Garp was the one who defeated them because Garp is a Marine. So, it's in the government's interest to publish that the Marines won over these pirates, when in reality, it was both Garp and Roger. But because Roger was a pirate, only Garp gets credit in the newspaper. But then also we found out from Sengoku that Garp doesn't like taking credit for that incident either. In fact, Garp doesn't even like talking about the God's Valley incident at all. So we go back to Island Fulaled after the Rock's pirates have been defeated in God's Valley, and apparently Big Mom and Kaido agreed to meet up in that island, but Kaido just straight up ditched her. Okay, so Big Mom was really upset. She's looking for Kaido. So we know that Big Mom gave Kaido his Devil Fruit the day that Rocks fell. So I'm guessing that Big Mom said, okay Kaido, I'm going to give you this super rare Devil Fruit, but then we're going to meet back up in Island Fulaled, and then you're going to have to repay the favor. Except Kaido never showed up. He just took the mythical type Zoan and bailed. Now it turns out that Higurashi was always behind the scenes of Wano being ruled by both Kaido and Orochi. And I've said this before, but I think it's pretty obvious that Higurashi was actually working for the world government. I feel like she was always secretly a government agent that was sort of there to have the government involved in some way, shape, or form, to have some degree of control over Wano through Orochi and Kaido. And we kind of get reminded of this as we see the last CP0 agent use Geppo, or Skywalk, to leave Onigashima. Because if you remember, Rob Lucci said that in case Kaido happens to get defeated, in case Kaido falls, then the world government will just go in there and take control over the entire country. That's what they're planning on doing, which to me signifies that the reason why they didn't do this before is because they were comfortable because Kaido was there in the first place. And so in this case, we find out that Higurashi was actually sort of the one who coerced or persuaded Kaido to move into Wano. Not only that, but she's also kind of the reason for why Odin gets defeated as well. And then this CP0 agent actually interfered in the Luffy fight as well. So it seems like, if Higurashi was actually a government agent, it just seems like the government has always had like a vested interest in terms of who gets to rule Wano. I also find it interesting that Higurashi mentions to Kaido that throughout history, weapons have been able to shape the world. I'm pretty sure that's a reference to the ancient weapons. I'm pretty sure that she's involved with the world government, and the world government has always viewed the ancient weapons as these dangerous things that have the power to reshape the world. And then Kaido goes on to mention them at some point in a speech he makes as well. So I'm pretty sure that's what she means. The flashback then cuts to a scene inside of Onigashima where Kaido is giving a speech to his men, which is very reminiscent of the speech that he gives when he's first introduced. When he said he wanted to start the greatest war the world has ever seen? Yeah, what happened with that? Did he mean the new Onigashima project, or did he mean the final war? Because if he meant the raid, if he meant Onigashima, then, nobody significant really died. At least not yet. We flash forward a little bit more to a point in time where Yamato has already found Odin's journal. And so apparently Lunarians, or King's Race, were sort of told to await Joy Boy's return. And so this kind of confirms that King's Race, or Lunarians, were Joy Boy supporters, because they were awaiting the second coming of Joy Boy, which is why the world government viewed them as a threat and decided to wipe them out. And so after that conversation is when the chapter starts moving around all over the place to show us snippets of different locations. So we get the lanterns heading up to the sky, two of which we see by the end there. One of them has sort of like a prayer or a wish for Luffy, Luffy, and the other one has one that relates to Momonosuke. So Momonosuke, just last chapter, right? He got a flashback about how it was his responsibility to restore the Kozuki clan. We also get a shot of Kid. It seems like he's using observation haki for something. And at this point, honestly, I'm almost ready to throw in the towel. I'm almost ready to give up on Kid actually doing something else in this arc. Or at least, something interesting, regardless of whether or not there's a giant metal sword outside of Onigashima that he could use. I'm almost ready to give up on that expectation, honestly. And I'm almost ready to give up on Usopp as well. And people told me from the start, they said, Sawyer, if you want Usopp to do something cool, you have to wait for Elbaf. And I'm like, but this is Wano. Like, this is a very important arc. But I guess in this case, Oda decided to split the focus between the Straw Hats and the Scabbards. We get a shot of Sanji with little Chuji and Osome there. And we get a shot of Frankie with Zoro. And I know that there are still people that are hoping that Zoro gets to kill Kaido after this. I've always been pretty blunt and honest about my opinion about that. Like, to me, like, the way that One Piece works, it's just so obvious that Oda wants Luffy to be number one in everyone's mind, including the reader. So, like, I don't think that he would ever do something that deliberately takes away the spotlight from Luffy, to the point where Oda ended up changing Luffy's devil fruit from a rubber fruit to a god fruit. And so even though I never really agreed with the Zoro kills Kaido theory, even though I never really supported that theory, I do understand people's arguments behind wanting the Straw Hats to have a bigger role in this arc. Because to me, I feel like Chopper, Brook, and Usopp were sacrificed in this arc. And they were sacrificed so that characters like Tama, Momonosuke, and the Scabbards could get more screen time. And so we see Zoro there with Frankie in that small panel. It doesn't seem like he's in a condition to get back up. And then we get Kaido's statement to King by the end, where he pretty much admits that it has to be Luffy, because Luffy is Joy Boy, and so Luffy has to be the one to defeat Kaido. Now, in terms of the bounties after Wano, I do think that it's significant that we see the ZP0 member essentially walk out of Onigashima, fly away, because he would be the one to report back, hey, this character did this character defeated this character, so we have to up the bounties accordingly. But he's leaving, right? So before, the Marys, the spies with the eye symbol, they were the ones that were sort of like cameras all through Onigashima. And so CP0 would like find out what each character did because of the spies, because of the Marys. But that's no longer the case. So I feel like they already have the information that they need to adjust the bounties. So the CP0 guy was like, okay, I've seen enough. It looks like Luffy's gonna defeat Kaido. I have to get out of here. I have enough information to like know what bounty increases I'm gonna give to these characters post-Wano. That being said, the arc's not over yet, so I'm still hopeful. Fingers crossed that the Straw Hats that haven't gotten enough to do in this arc still get to do something cool by the end of this. Hopefully before the final party that kind of leads to the end of the arc. Anyway, we see the water of Zo beginning to flood everything and put out the fire. And I do have to make the observation that even as Robin is drowning, she still looks beautiful. Like, she's drowning in the most graceful way possible in that panel. Also, apparently the flood interrupted the potential fight between Apu and Imbi, #1. Now, in the scene with Denjiro and Hiyori, we get to see Orochi's burning head in the foreground. And I'm still kind of skeptical about whether he's dead or not. Because something that I think is interesting is that we never really got an explanation as to how Orochi's power works. Like, we could speculate and we could make assumptions based on what we've seen, but maybe like Oda deliberately is hiding a rule to his devil fruit power to have him survive this. So I could totally see Oda like having Orochi come back and then Orochi saying like, even if you cut off all my heads, you can only really kill me if you do so and so. And you didn't do that, so now I'm back again. Anyway, the final clash between Luffy and Doflamingo continues. It's actually Kaido, but it's literally the same thing. It's a big punch, and Luffy's trying to push through. One of the main differences between that clash and this clash is that Doflamingo actually used Awakening. Anyway, we know that the fire clouds that are sustaining the island in the air are pretty much a representation or an indicator of Kaido's level of energy. And so the clouds fade away, meaning that Kaido has actually reached his limit or is reaching his limit. At least that's what we're meant to believe. Unless, of course, he uses Awakening. By the way, did I mention that Doflamingo, who was an underling of Kaido, who worked under Kaido, who was much, much weaker than Kaido, could use Awakening? And so Kaido asks Luffy a question. He says, like, Straw Hat, what kind of world do you want to build? And we all know that Kaido is secretly thinking, I hope that he answers correctly so that I can become a fan of him as well. And I think the reason for why Luffy's answer is going to hit home, why it's really going to touch Kaido, is because we learn from this flashback that Kaido knows what it's like to starve. He knows what it's like to be hungry, because the Marines say that that when he gets captured on purpose when he gets hungry, because he wants to eat. And so Luffy's words are obviously a pretty direct echo to his promise to Tama at the beginning of the arc, and those words are also an echo to Ace's promise to Tama when he met her. Now, some people are saying that Luffy's statement to Kaido is actually the revelation of Luffy's secret dream, which was also Roger's secret dream, but I don't think so. I mean, I think it's strongly connected to Luffy's secret dream, which in my opinion is to bring out world peace. And I think it was Arthur, Library of O'Hara, who said that Luffy's secret dream is to have a party with the entire world. And I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if that were the case. And so in order to have a party, you need food, right? And so not only does that connect to Luffy telling Sanji that without him, he can't become king of the pirates, but it also connects to Sanji's code. Because part of Sanji and Zeph's code is that you don't refuse food to anyone who's hungry, even if it happens to be an enemy or an opponent. If an enemy is hungry, you still feed them. Plus, Luffy also said that he wanted to have a big party after this, so... I mean, that always happens every arc, but I feel like those words are specifically relevant because... the party's coming up next. So if Kaido is actually down for the count after this chapter, the only thing that would need to be addressed would be the government ships outside of Wano. But then again, you have Sunisha right there, so. And even if Momonosuke is exhausted and can't command Sunisha because, he's falling asleep or whatever, maybe Tama can use her Kibidango on the giant elephant and command the elephant to destroy the ships. And speaking of Momonosuke, I felt like there was so much buildup. Panels upon panels of people telling Momonosuke, like, you gotta create these fire clouds. You have to do it, Momonosuke. And Momonosuke replying like, no, I can't do it. I can't. I'm not strong enough. I can't do this. I'm not competent. And so I began to think about, okay, what would be another solution to this problem? But no, it turns out that the solution is actually the obvious one, which is for him to, I don't want to say fart out some clouds, but he kind of poofs them into existence just in the nick of time. So it turned out to be a very obvious and simple solution to a problem that I had thought was more complex and more difficult. By the way, just very quickly, the way in which Luffy's punch blasts through the magma, the way that the hit actually makes contact with Kaido's actual face, the fact that he busts him on the cheek and the side of his face is very obviously a reference to when Ace melted the dragon statue back when he met Yamato. The thing that really stood out to me from Kaido's flashback is actually not what's in it, but what's not in it, because there are significant chunks of information missing from this flashback. For example, we don't get to see rocks at all, right? We learn nothing about Yamato's mother or anything about Yamato as a child. Those are things that we need to see at some point. I'm not sure if we're going to get to see them here in Wano through Kaido, but we have to get them at some point down the road. And we also don't get anything about why it is that Kaido wants to die. That's a huge part of his character that is also missing from this flashback. And a part of me really does suspect that this is actually the end of the fight, which would be a very average ending to a fight. Just because there's been years of buildup. Because if I remember correctly, Wano started in either the late spring, early summer of 2018. And, it's going to end in either the late spring or the early summer of 2022. So it's been 4 years. But then the conflict of Wano itself had actually begun to be foreshadowed even before then. You could even argue that some of the building blocks for the basis of this arc got introduced as early as we got introduced to Kinemon and Momonosuke in Punk Hazard. So it's been a very long time to get to this resolution, to this finale. And if this is actually the finale, it feels like an average finale. It feels like the ending of Dressrosa, the ending of Skypiea, which are arcs that took a lot less time to build up. So I'm a little bit in denial that this is the end of the fight. And I was in denial when Sanji's fight ended and when Zoro's fight ended. Because I remember, I think Sanji and Zoro, both of their chapters end with one pretty, nice attack, really flashy, good looking attack. And I'm like, is that really the end for King and Queen? And I was in denial back then, and I said, no, I think we still have a little bit more, maybe a chapter more to go. But no, that was actually the end of their fights. The next chapter, like, they were declared the winners. So I'm kind of getting the same sort of vibe from this. In fact, the ending of this chapter reminds me of like when Big Mom was quote unquote defeated by Law and Kid. It's also kind of weird too, because when the Nika Nika no Mi awakening happened, it kind of felt like Oda was telling us, like, I'm throwing the rules out the window. Like, I'm just going to go crazy. I'm going to use this as a cartoon awakening and just do a lot of crazy things, just really creative, like, fun things for Luffy. But then the way that this ends, if this is actually the end, it's like he's going back to basics. So he played around with it for a little bit with the craziness and the wackiness of the awakening. But then he goes back to Luffy defeating his enemy with a giant punch. So it's like, at first he was like very creative, pretty crazy, pretty outrageous. And then he just basically goes back to the same formula. Now, what makes this finale a passable one in my mind is that at least it took us several rounds to get here. It's not like Luffy, never lost to Kaido. Like, no, he got KO'd several times before this. So in my mind, if this is actually the ending to the fight, the several rounds that took place before this make this ending a passable one, an average one. I know there's a lot of people out there that just want this to be the end because they're already tired and they want to move on. And I want to move on too, because what comes after this is, well, the party comes after this, but we also have to learn a lot more about what's been going on around the world. So we get the world building aspect of the show, and those are the juicy chapters. Those are the chapters that I love, and I'm pretty sure that most of you love as well. So a lot of people just want this fight to be over so that we can get to those chapters. However, if it were up to me, what I would do is, we see Luffy falling to the ground by the end of this chapter. So I would have either Marco, Law, or Chopper, or actually no, all three of them go to help Luffy out, give him some medicine so that he can have a little bit more stamina, maybe, wake him up or whatever, or actually maybe the minks can give him the mink medicine that they gave Zoro so that he can, fight for a little bit longer, and then have Kaido reveal his awakening, and then have both of them go and fight on the mountain, on Mount Fuji, and have that be the climax, the epic finale of that fight. However, in accepting that, that's probably not going to happen. I did think a lot about, okay, if this is the end, then why was it that Kaido, the strongest creature, the strongest pirate, why was it that Kaido was never confirmed or shown to have awakening, right? So I did think about it, and I came up with a theory that relates to the flashback in this chapter. So we know that Kaido got his devil fruit power from Big Mom the same day that Rocks ended up getting defeated in God's Valley, right? And so the Rocks pirates got defeated 38 years ago, which means that Kaido has had his devil fruit for 38 years. And in this arc, we have characters like Law. Law is 26 years old, and he already has his awakened paramecia. So he's been able to awaken his devil fruit. Now Kid is actually 23, and he's also been able to awaken his devil fruit as well. Luffy is currently 19 years old, and he just awakened his. And the thing about Luffy is that he's actually the only Zoan, well, actually the only devil fruit user that we've actually seen sort of like go through the process to reach awakening, right? So here's my theory. What if the requirements for awakening a Zoan are different than for awakening a paramecia or a logia? Because if you remember, what happens to Luffy before he awakens? Luffy dies, right? It's like he literally had to die to awaken his Zoan devil fruit power. Even Law says, yeah, I can't hear Luffy's voice anymore. That aura, that sort of essence of what makes Luffy Luffy is gone. So what if, in order to awaken a Zoan devil fruit, the user actually has to die first? And maybe that's why Kaido has been trying to die all this time. Because for him, it's about brute force and obtaining strength. Survival of the fittest. Except he can't die because he's so tough. So that's why he gets sad. Because he can't awaken his devil fruit power. He also gives Luffy a speech about what awakening actually is, as they're fighting. It happened recently. But then he also has a speech about death when he's fighting the scabbards. And he tells them that death is what truly completes a person. Death brings human beings to completion. So I'm wondering if, maybe he has to die to awaken his power. And I'll be the first to admit that maybe this theory of mine is me going on copium. Regardless, I just wanted to share it with you. I did notice that as Kaido is falling to the ground, there is sort of a swirl in the sky, like a cloud in the shape of a spiral, in the shape of a coiled dragon up above. And so again, I wonder if that swirl is going to be significant, if the pattern means anything. Because again, it reminded me of Sanji's eyebrows. We still don't know the significance behind that. It reminded me of the swirls in Devil Fruits. And it's also the shape of Luffy's eyebrows, the way that Luffy's eyebrows look when he's in the Nika Nika mode, or in Gear 5th. So I'm wondering if that has any significance that we'll find out about next chapter. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I thought the chapter was okay. Lots of things to discuss, lots of topics for discussion. As a finale, it was average, but lots of stuff to talk about. So thought the chapter was okay. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you guys later. Thanks for your support. Bye.